Hey, welcome back to the Happy Trekkers channel. My name is Mike, and I thought today I would answer a few questions about Mexico. Now, I've made a handful of videos about our travels to Mexico, and inevitably some different questions come up that I don't address during the individual video, but they're good questions. I thought, oh, this is a perfect example or a perfect opportunity to talk a little bit about it. So I'm just going to go through some of these questions that people have left me here on the channel. Incidentally, if you have a question about Mexico or any of the videos that I make sure you make a comment and let me know. I get back to virtually everybody asks me something. I try to give you a response as best I have. So the first one is from Caters TV. Do I need to get a SIM card to use my Uber app or get reception in Tijuana? The answer to that is no, you do not. In fact, I'm going to expand that. I have not had to get a SIM card or anything special in any part of Mexico. That's anywhere from Tijuana to Mexico City, all the way over in the Yucatan. I've been fine with my phone. Now, I have an iPhone 8 Plus because Plus is better than just an iPhone 8. They are on an iPhone 14 now, so I'm just a tad outside of the norm, I guess. But nonetheless, it worked fine. It has worked fine. I'm with Verizon. I used to be with AT&T. I think on my first trip to Mexico, I was with AT&T. I now have Verizon, but the coverage is fine. If you look at their coverage map, they cover pretty much all of Mexico, certainly all of the bigger, most populated areas. So I've not had any problem with that. A little second part of that question, he talks about Uber. Incidentally, Uber works fine all over Mexico. Again, the places that I've been, it works just like it does here. It's the same app, so you don't have to download anything new. I just go down there, my phone eventually switches over and it basically says, welcome to Mexico. Make sure that you have a plan on your with your provider that allows you service down there. Most of them do, to a limited amount. But as soon as you do that, you can just log on to the Uber and order an Uber just like you can here in the U.S. So very, very simple process. The second question is from Ra. Ra says, you're absolutely correct. Most of what we encounter on the subject of healthcare in Mexico is next to irrelevant. He's talking about videos and people that mention healthcare, if at all, on a video about how to move to Mexico, or it sidesteps the really important questions. So let me explain what he's talking about. We made a video on basically healthcare in Mexico and why we were not moving to Mexico at the time. And the reason that is we were planning on moving. We had everything relatively set. Like mentally, we were prepared to move. We had some logistics to do, such as residency and stuff like that, but we wanted to move. If anything, we're going to move down for the 180 days that you normally can get. Normally, it's changed a little bit, but that you can normally get as a U.S. citizen. And we were going down to Mérida, which is over in the Yucatan. 2 days before we left, my wife was told that she may have cancer. Turned out it was in fact cancer. That threw a little bit of a monkey wrench in things. We asked the doctor, we said, look, I mean, we're leaving in 2 days. We're going to LAX and we're flying to Mérida for a month. We've got the Airbnb, everything's set. Flights, we're taking our cat. I mean, we are literally gone in 2 days. Do we need to cancel? And they said, no, go anyway. It's going to take us a week or two to determine if it's in fact cancer, get the labs back. And then it'll take us a week or two to set up all the doctors. But once you get back, you're going to be very busy. So the trip that was going to be scouting and seeing where we want to live in different neighborhoods, all that changed to this may be our last vacation for a while. So we're going to go down and just enjoy living there, being there for the month and checking it all out, but knowing we're going to come back. What never really entered our mind was to just go, because the problem with this is this. We had thought about, we're 52 years old. We had never had any major health scare. We had thought about, well, what if you break your finger? What if you do if you twist an ankle? What if you have to get stitches? Something, all these sort of normal things that we don't normally do anyway, but what if those things happen? Well, if you watch a lot of YouTube videos on people that go to Mexico, they'll tell you it's all relatively inexpensive. You can go in, and there was the couple, the Kinetic Kennons, they were out of Puerto Vallarta. He broke his ankle or something one time, and I want to say it was $150. It was really cheap for x-rays and everything else. So in our mind, we kept thinking, oh, okay, great. We got plenty of cash sort of set aside for that. What's the main problem? We can pay for a doctor and they'll get our prescriptions and we'll go to, we can do all that with cash in hand. Cancer's a little different. And until that moment, we had never really thought of cancer. Shame on us, but we had never really thought of it. So we immediately started to realize, like, well, we don't have insurance down there. Cancer's not a one and done thing. We don't just go into a doctor and take care of it. This is an ongoing, turned out to be a year and a half of ongoing chemo, radiation, all these different things. Does insurance cover that? What is the out-of-pocket for constantly going for chemo and radiation? I mean, she was going for radiation once a day, chemo every other week, constantly going to do a doctor. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot. It was overwhelming. And quite frankly, we were very scared. We don't know where this is going to go, how bad it was going to turn out. And we didn't want to have to try to navigate the whole healthcare system and the insurance and all that sort of thing as our first step of moving to Mexico. That would have been the first thing we did once we moved into an Airbnb or whatever the case. The very first thing we would have done is had to deal with this cancer thing. And quite frankly, although it's much more expensive here in the U.S., we had insurance that was covering us. We knew the system. We spoke English. I'm not going to downplay that at all. We spoke English. We speak English. I speak a little bit of Spanish. Not very much, but a little bit I can get by. But I want to know that when the doctor says anything, I am picking up on what he is and is not, or she is not saying. The subtleties, the nuances. I had actually a little bit of an argument when the first day that he was saying cancer. He was saying, yeah, it looks like cancer. And I was like, look, you're telling me it looks like cancer. I hear cancer because I don't deal with cancer every day. When I hear cancer, I think death. You as a doctor may see it differently, but you need to put some expectations in our head because we don't know how bad this is, and we're trying to read it. Well, none of that conversation going to happen if I was having to translate from Spanish on Google Translate, or if the doctor spoke English, but maybe not as his first language, so we're missing something in the interpretation. So people don't talk about any of that in most of the videos about moving to Mexico and the healthcare. They have excellent doctors. Yes, they have excellent hospitals in Mexico. The insurance there is relatively inexpensive compared to U.S. They have a great healthcare system. I just didn't want cancer to be the first exposure to it. I hope you can understand it. Some people gave us grief over that because it's the internet and people give you grief over everything. But the reality was I didn't not trust the system down there. I didn't trust me to fully understand it, embrace it, and quite frankly, just the energy to deal with her and her cancer and she having to deal with having cancer while we're trying to integrate ourselves in a new society. That's just a lot, and I think people could understand it, but again, there's always some idiot on the internet that has a better opinion of that. But yeah, it's a big deal. Think about that kind of stuff. Also, something about healthcare or health insurance, I should say, in Mexico. Most health insurance in Mexico, I would say all, but you never know. But most health insurance in Mexico does not cover pre-existing for 2 years. So meaning she had cancer, which meant any insurance we were to buy, private insurance, wouldn't have covered her anyway. So everything would have been out of pocket. Still may have been cheap. I don't know. But keep that in mind. If you've just had a heart attack or you just had some sort of big medical condition, cancer of some sort, you can go to Mexico. You can buy private insurance, but more often than not, that particular issue is going to be excluded for 2 years before they will then start to cover. Here in the United States, thanks to the ACA or Obamacare, as most people are familiar with, we have pre-existing coverage that is part of the law, so they have to cover you. So, that being said, let's see, Fête, I'm not sure. He's asking about, we took our cat down there. We did. We took our cat. They're doing research, just speaking to the various airlines. Some say they do not require the paperwork at all. Now, this may or may not have changed. So check your airline about taking a pet, whether it be a dog or a cat. We took a cat. There's some logistics in that. And it makes a difference. If you're flying in, I'm going to almost guarantee you're going to require some paperwork from your vet to fly. That is not from the government. Now, at the time that we went, the government, the Mexican government, did not require any kind of paperwork regarding our pet, our cat. The airline did. So we had to go to a vet here in San Diego, get her checked out, make sure she didn't have rabies or anything crazy like that. We had to get some extra shots, but that was on us, stuff that she needed anyways. That was like $300. Then the airline, we flew Delta and Aeromexico. So we had to go from LAX to Mexico City to Merida. That's 2 different flights, 2 separate days, just because the way it worked out. It wasn't like a layover. So we end up with paying for 2 flights. One LAX to Mexico City, a separate day the next morning, Mexico City to Merida. 2 flights, each of those cost $100 each for the cat. The cat's round trip tickets were $400. Our human tickets, I can't remember exactly now, but they were like $300. So the cat cost more to take her to Mexico than it did us. And she was in a cat carrier like this big, and she sat at my feet, or Mary Jane's feet, the entire trip. It is a ripoff, but it is what it is. You're either going to take your cat or your pet or not. Now, had she been a dog, a larger size dog, say a lab or something, she would have had to go in the cargo and had a big crate. Expenses can get much bigger. But, you know, our kids are grown, so our cat is the only thing we have. And we weren't going to leave her with friends for a month. So, it is what it is. But again, we had to have that paperwork when we got there. They did. There's a whole video. Watch the video. It's probably much easier to explain. But there was a little bit of hassle there. But again, it's the cat. What are you going to do? Hey, question of the day. What questions do you have about Mexico? Let me know in the comments. I'm glad to answer them. Now, back to the video. All right, so Priscilla, also talking about the cat, a couple different questions. She's going to fly down there. How long did it take your cat to adjust after you arrived in the Airbnb? Well, this isn't really this isn't specifically a Mexico question, but it is a travel question. If you're going to travel with your pet, be prepared. It's not their environment, right? You're going to take them to a Airbnb or whatever the case may be. But I wanted to mention this specifically. If you're going to lay over, like we did. Now, we had a cat. So we had to actually buy kitty litter. Now, if you have a dog, you could take them outside, let them go to the bathroom. But we had to buy kitty litter because that's what you do with cats. So we had to buy kitty litter to travel with and a little portable cardboard litter box. That day of travel was just a pain in the ass because there's so many little things like that. But then when we get to the hotel, hotels are not designed to have animals. They might say they're animals friendly, but we realized there was a hole underneath the front of the vanity, sort of like there's a kick plate, like in a vanity, where she could get into the vanity, and in the hole, or in the wall where the pipes come out, there was a larger hole that the pipe came out through the vanity, where she could have gotten into. We're like, oh my God, had we not checked that, she's nervous. We let her out of her little carrier thinking she'll walk around. Like, well, hell, we could have lost her in the walls of a hotel in Mexico City. That would have been a bad day. Then we got to the Airbnb. We scoured every single inch. We're down our hands and knees looking behind every piece of furniture to find any place that she may be able to get out of this Airbnb. So you got to think about that kind of stuff ahead of time. Now, a dog's not as big of a problem. They don't get through holes like cats do. Cats are quite bendy. But think about that kind of stuff. When you get there, what are you going to do with your animal? How are you going to handle every day? It's going to take them a day or two to adjust because they're animals and they don't know what happened. All of a sudden, they woke up one morning and they're in a different environment. Nothing is where it needs to be. Our cat hid for a good 24 hours, 48 hours before she even came out. We actually thought we lost her one time and freaking out. We're looking outside because we were guaranteed she's gotten out. Somehow, turns out she was hiding deep in a closet for 12 hours. So, a little scary, but, that's what happens. Jay asks, are you guys looking for potential retirement cities? Yes, we are, actually. As I mentioned, we were going to Mexico purely to look for a place to live. And if that had rolled into retirement someday, yes. But now we think, okay, well, where do we want to live? She's a year out from her last cancer surgery. So we're now thinking, okay, where do we want to live? Maybe next year. Give her 2 years to be fully fine, no cancers come back. Where do we want to live? As now we're currently working. We're 52, but do we want to roll that into retirement? Where might we want to retire if we decide to stay in the United States for a few more years? lots of those things. So Mexico is high on our list. We like Mexico. The food's great. The weather is fantastic. It's got a lot of different types of topography. You've got beaches, you've got mountains, you've got jungles, you've got desert. It's right here in our time zone, so for working, it's really good. But yeah, it's definitely a place we want to consider, and I would urge any of you to consider. Watch, I've got tons of video on places to live around the world and costs that you should expect. Thailand's on our list. Philippines is on our list. Some of the places in Europe would be on our list. Belize, Colombia. There's a lot of places we want to check out, and we may never retire to one place, but I can almost assure you that we are going to retire somewhere else other than the United States. That's not a knock on the United States. It's just we lived here all of our lives, so it's interesting to maybe live someplace else. Gringo Loco's friend of the channel. They bring up a couple different points here. So it says good info, especially about the rental income. So this is a good question. This refers to a video that we made about moving to Yucatan. I did an interview with Casey Leonard. She runs the Yucatan Transitional Services, which helps Americans and expats move to Mexico, and specifically Yucatan, because that's where she lives, but Mexico in general, and some of the ins and outs of the immigration process. And she mentioned that rental income is a bit of a tricky income. And I would tell you, I was a mortgage underwriter, so rental income is a tricky thing because most people, and I have rental property, most people try to show a loss on their rental income. Now, that means that, and this happens every time I've ever done a loan as an underwriter, back when I did that, for someone who has property, they will say, wait, I get $1,500, $2,000 a month for my rental place. Yes, but you wrote off almost, if not more than that, every month because of all these various things that you can do. Now, there's a way to add some of that back, but nonetheless, you have to be very careful if you're self-employed, if you have rental property, these sort of things. You tend to want to show the least amount of income for tax purposes. But then you go over to the consulate, the Mexican consulate, and you say, well, wait, I make all this money. Now, if they're looking at your taxes or they're looking at something to show, they may say, yeah, but you don't. You don't. You just told the government that you don't make that much money. You say you make $1,500 a month on rental, but we know that you have lots of expenses. In fact, you say you make a lot of expenses, which means you don't make $1,500. So the point to that was income that they use for immigration is important. And we'll get to that. I think somebody else asked a question about the income levels. You need to show that you have a stable and consistent income, and rental income, I guess, from what Casey had said, is one they scrutinize pretty heavily. So doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you might have to have some extra proof. You might have to jump through some hoops. You might have to convince them that this is a legitimate income that is going to pay for your existence down in Mexico. Hey, do me a favor. If this is the sort of video that gives you value, make sure you like and subscribe, and make sure you ring the bell so you get notified every time we drop a new video. That'll help me understand what it is you're looking for, and I'll try to make better videos that fit your needs. Thanks a lot. This follows right into the same thing. Banana Patch. What a lovely name. Banana Patch. The average Social Security is about $1,500. That's here in the United States. That will keep most Americans from retiring in Mexico. And then she says, oh, I just saw the $31,000 in savings. That works. Now, what she's referring to here is if you're going to move to Mexico and get residency, you need one of two things. You either need X amount of dollars a month coming in, or you need a certain amount of dollars, say, in savings or investment. When she made this comment, or when I posted that video originally, was a little over a year ago, and those numbers have changed slightly. Well, I should say slightly. They've changed. So what she's saying is, I don't remember how much the amount was at the time for the monthly income, but what her point was, I'm saying Banana Patch, maybe a male, I don't know. But what they are saying is $1,500 is about the average U.S. income. That's not enough to get you immigration for a temporary residency, because they want more than that. That is true. Currently, Here in San Diego, if I went to the Mexican consulate here in San Diego, I would need to show that I individually make at least $2,600 a month in in income, and my wife would have to show that she makes $2,600 a month as well, or a combined total income of more than $5,200. That might be fine. You might make $10,000 a month, and that's going to cover both of you. That's fine. But if you don't, say you're both on Social Security and you both make, say, $1,500, well, you're below that number. So what do you do? Now, the second part of her comment there is, I just saw the $31,000 in savings. Well, that number has also changed a little bit. And I think it's all tied to the Mexican minimum wage, is where that 15 or the 2,600 comes into play, and where there's 31,000. But now that 31,000, the last time I checked, which was a month or two ago, was, I want to say, 43,000. So you need to have 43,000 in savings. So what that means is, they need you to make $2,600 a month in monthly income, consistent monthly income for the past 12 months. You don't make that. You make Social Security, and it's $1,500. So you're $1,100 short. But you've got 50 grand, you've got 100 grand, you've got whatever you've got in savings. If you're above that, again, that current number of 43, I think, then you're fine. You don't need to make the 2,600 and have savings. It's one or the other. So you want to keep an eye on that. You may not qualify for either one. That's unfortunate, but it's a reality. There may be some things you can do, but essentially what I think, they're trying to make sure that people that come down there that probably have never worked down there, don't have the ability to work, because that's a whole different visa issue, that you're not going to then become a draw against their social programs. You're not going to go on some sort of welfare, the social, the health care that they provide for free. They want you to come down there and be basically self-sustained. And that money, $2,600 a month, is well above what a Mexican minimum wage is, and what the average citizen makes. I want to say the average citizen in Mexico makes $400, maybe $500 a month, and they want you to make $2,600. So you can see they don't want you coming down there with very little income. They want you to be again completely independent of their system. So keep that in mind. There are other places, check out the other video I'll put over there, where you can live for $1,500 around the world. There are plenty of places. The visas are all different. Pandemic has changed a lot of these visas. You always want to check that out. As an expense point, yeah, you can live in Mexico for $1,500, well, expense-wise. The visa might be the tricky thing. So you might want to live down there for 6 months, come back, and then go back and do another 6 months, versus the residency. It's up to you. So Ashley asked, I know she said not to come down there to work, but is that always the case? Now what she's referring to is, again, Casey Leonard from the Yucatan Transitional Services, who says, don't come down there looking for a job. You need to bring your income with you. And is that always the case? Yeah, that's pretty much always the case. She says, I'm a respiratory therapist with a degree and many years of hospital experience here in the U.S. Not to be overly blunt, but it doesn't matter. And that's not because of her ability. It sounds like she's well qualified, but they don't want you coming down there and working. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. You need to have a couple different ways. You need to get a visa and this, that, and the other to even work there at all. You can't go down there and just say, okay, I'm going to take 6 months, which is usually what they'll give you, the max that they'll give you, on a tourist visa and work. That is illegal. You cannot do that. You can get the ability to work, but here is the other problem. That's why Casey says you need to bring your income with you. One of the advantages of going to Mexico is it is much less expensive compared to here in the U.S. That's why a lot of people go. Other than the beautiful people and beautiful country that it is, it's way less expensive. That's just a fact of life. But they also pay less. Obviously, right? They couldn't just supply and demand. They can't pay $100,000 for this and then charge $400 a month in rent, $2 for a meal. You can't do that. It's not the way it works, right? Wouldn't work that way. Any place else in the world doesn't work that way there. The average income for a Mexican citizen is like $400 or $500 a month. I mean, you can have a doctor, trained, well-trained, top educated doctor, $40,000 a year. So So you could you get a visa to work there? Yes. Is that going to be a good idea for you? Probably not. Meaning you're going to go down there and it's not going to be the savings that you think it will be. You're going to be making a much lower income. You're going to have to, therefore, look for places to live that fit that lower income. This is fine. There's nothing wrong with that as long as your expectations are proper. If you're thinking you're going to go down like a lot of the people from the United States thinking, well, I'll make $3,000 a month and I'll spend maybe $1,000 and live really well. That's great. You're not going to make $3,000 a month down there as a respiratory therapist. It's just not going to be the case. So you need to bring your income with you. Have some sort of income. Work online. Have investments that spit out income. Something that is not going to be reliant on a sort of Mexican employer. You might work for an American company down there. That's different. You might make more money doing that, but by and large, no. You want to go down there with an income that you're bringing with you. This is why digital nomads, and I'm using that term in a loose sense, but someone like me who works online for my company, I could do that very easily, right? It doesn't matter. I'm working from this office 10 hours a day at my normal job, so I could easily transplant myself down there and not miss a beat. That works really well, that geo arbitrage, where I'm making US dollars, I'm spending Mexican pesos. So, good question though, really good question. John asks, how are the communication with locals in English? This is going to vary depending on where you're at. Where I've been, say here in Tijuana area, which is just outside of San Diego, basically across the border, to Mexico City, everybody seemed to speak English. Yucatan was pretty good. And here again, this Tijuana, Ensenada area, it's well spoken enough that I didn't have a problem. Two thoughts on that in general. You should learn some of the language. And I say some of the language, meaning if you're going to visit, learn the words. Learn the words, obviously the words, but learn words. Learn the bathroom. Learn police. Learn help. Learn restaurant. Learn hotel. Understand basic names of like road and things of this that are going to get you through your basic day. Grocery store, something like the market, something like that. Water, soft drink, things that you think about what you're going to do on a daily basis. One of the funny things they always teach you is how to say hello, or not say hello, but how to say your name. Every language class teaches you how to say your name. You'll realize very quickly nobody cares. Nobody cares about your name. How often does anybody ask your name? When you go into a grocery store, nobody asks your name. You're there to buy something. So think about, how do I say how much? Things like this. Learn those words. Learn 15, 20 words. You can do that very easily. Spanish is very easy to learn. Learn those words. Do you need to learn how to structure various sentences? No, not today. If you're going to live down there, you should. I'm a big advocate of that. But going to visit, no. You can get by with a handful of words, pantomiming, or using Google Translate. What do I got here on my desk? This is a calculator, Texas Instruments financial calculator. Do I need to have the words for Texas Instrument financial calculator? I'm never going to know those words. It's going to be a long time before financial calculator comes up in my Spanish learning. But if I needed to, say, buy this, and I'm walking around, I get it on a shelf, and I want to know how much it costs, I need to learn the word for cost. Because think about it, if someone came up to you on the street and they said the word cost and they pointed to a thing, you know what they mean, right? If someone comes up and they're looking and they're like, bus, what are they? They're asking you, what time is the bus? You know it. You just know. There's certain things that we all know. You can shake your head, yes, no. That's fairly universal. Certainly, it's fine in Mexico. You can get by with that sort of thing, and for the rest of those things, you're just going to pick up your phone and say, what time is the bus to Valladolid? And it's going to spit it out in Spanish. The person can listen to it or they can read it, and that's going to work really, really well. So do you need to speak Spanish? No. Do they speak English? Kind of. It's always a good idea to let people know that you don't speak Spanish very well. And don't ask. This is the ugly American. Don't immediately lead with, do you speak English? Be respectful. they don't need to speak English. English isn't their main language. Tell someone, say, yo, lo siento, mi español es no bueno. Was it the other? Lo siento. I'm trying to think of the word. Un poco español. So a small bit of Spanish. Something that's, I always start with lo siento because I'm like, I'm so sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. And then I might say, tu habla español, and then they'll say, un poco. They may speak a little English. That's fine. 2 bits of little English and little Spanish, you can probably make it work. So, but don't let that stop you from going. Never let that stop you from going. Let's see here, what else we got? Matt says, more people are moving out of the country, meaning the U.S., because it's getting way too expensive. Well, yeah, that's true. The U.S. is very expensive. In some places, I live in California, it's very expensive. The least affordable big city in the United States is Miami. People think, oh, we're going to move to Florida where it's cheap. No, it's not. The problem with Florida is the prices have gone skyrocketing. I have a house in Florida, very expensive for real estate, and the incomes have not kept pace. So Miami, this year I should say, 22, is considered the least affordable city in the U.S. Doesn't mean it costs the most in dollars, but because of the difference between income and expenses, it's the least affordable. But there are places all over the country, New York City, you need to make 4 times the average income just to afford the average apartment. So, yeah, it's going to be very expensive. So places like Mexico, very attractive. About 1 million Americans have moved to Mexico. 1 million. Everybody says they're going to move to Canada. No, they're not. They're going to move to Mexico. If you look at the numbers. Why? Because it's warm and the food's great and they have beautiful beaches and everything else. So nothing wrong with Canada. My wife is in Montreal right this moment on business. It seems beautiful. But yeah, the beach in Mexico is prettier. Ed says, you guys are empty nesting in style. Well, yeah, we are. I will give you one thing, though. I wish we had done this way earlier when our kids were little. If I had to do it over again, which I guess every parent says that, I would have spent less money on my house and cars over the course of their lives and spent a lot more money on plane tickets. So, yeah, in our empty nest, our kids are both grown and on their own. Yeah, we are living it in style, but yeah, do it now. If you've got little kids, don't let that stop you. There's plenty of videos out there from people who have their families. Watch those. Could you imagine growing up and you look back over your childhood and like, yeah, I lived in 4 different countries. I can speak 3 languages. As an American, that is very unusual, and how rich would that environment be? Yeah, you'll miss out on some of the stuff in the U.S., but as we all know, as you get older, half the stuff you think was important as a kid is not that important. But having that rich cultural background and understanding of different cultures and different languages, yeah, it's one of my great regrets that I didn't do that. So this is a comment that I got frequently. We did one particular video on the cost of living in Merida. Now, I prefaced it with, look, we're going down there for a month. We're not moving there. That was that month that we went to check it out. But I wanted to let people know that might be going to do the same thing. These are the expenses we had as U.S. citizens and having raised and lived in a U.S. society. These are the expenses we had in that very first month. This is not the expenses you would have from moving there. But people took that opportunity over and over again to tell me how I got ripped off or I could have spent way less. In every instance, they were talking about what you would do if you lived there versus if you were vacationing there. So when I mention the costs, a lot of times I'm talking about the cost of living there versus what you'll spend if you're going to be there for a month in an Airbnb. Our Airbnb was a beautiful little place, a 1-bedroom. We had our own private pool. There's a video on that as well. You can check it out. But at the same time, that was an Airbnb for a month. I think it was like $1,300. Now that's less than I spend for my mortgage in Florida and my rent here in California. So it was still quite a good deal for me. But is it $1,300? Is that what the average Mexican in that neighborhood spends? No, not even close. They're well below that. I get it. He mentioned specifically water. I said I spent 200 pesos on water. He said that's absurd. Okay. Considering you can buy an empty 20-liter jug for like 35 pesos and refill it yourself at a water dispenser kiosk for about 10 pesos. That's absolutely fantastic. Where is that? Where do I buy this empty jug? Where is this kiosk? How am I going to get it to and from the Airbnb? I don't have a car. That all makes perfect sense. And if I lived there, I would know that, or I would find that out, and I would eventually change from paying a guy to bring water. But I was there for a month, and there's only so much I'm going to sort of look into in terms of the daily activity. So when you think expenses, realize that, yeah, your first couple months down there, you're going to spend a lot more money than you will your next couple, and then probably more than you're going to spend the next couple months after that. And 2 years later, you're going to be living like a local, and everything's going to have a different value. My friend Greg lives in Thailand. I've done a video with him, and he moved there right before the pandemic. And when he got there, he's like me. We met in Florida. We've been friends for years. He thought in terms of dollars. Now he's been there almost 3 years. He thinks in terms of baht, which is the Thai baht. So what was a $6 meal and very, very cheap to him at one point is now a X amount of baht meal, and it's very expensive because you don't need to spend $6 on a meal there. But if I got a $6 meal here in San Diego, I would be ecstatic because nothing is $6. I'd be thrilled to pay $6 when I was there, but eventually, and the locals would say, "What is wrong with you? Why are you spending $6?" Eventually, though, I would learn where to go, what to buy, how to spend 87 cents on a meal, which is things that he's done. His first apartment was like $320 or something ridiculous. Yes, would the Airbnb cost a lot more? Of course. So when like Carlos makes this statement, and again, he's not alone. I'm not picking on Carlos. We've heard this kind of thing over and over again. And the point is, there's a difference between being a vacation or a tourist and living there. I say that at the same time, recognize that I'm still a U.S. citizen. I've grown up here. There are certain creature comforts that I'm going to want, and if I can't afford them, I'm going to want to pay for them. That might be more than, say, the Mexican citizen and native, if you will, that lives right next to me, who's not used to paying for that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that I'm necessarily overspending. Certain things I want and creature comforts that I can afford, and I'm going to be buying that. So you're going to find that happy medium between the two. This one brings up almost a bit of controversy that I'm going to only get into a little bit. So this is Ram probably. It says basically the cost of living for Mexicans in their own country has increased. This is because people like me either go down there for long term or they even move there. Since people who rent their houses do so at higher prices in dollars or its equivalent in pesos, which is cheap for the Americans and it's expensive for the Mexicans. So what he's talking about is exactly true. If you go down there, say when I was in Merida, and you want to buy a piece of property, a house that's already there, and you're going to renovate it. If you go down there trying to buy one that's already renovated, it's going to cost you $200,000-$400,000. You can buy that, or you're talking about people again that live in the same block that make $400 a month. And I'm going to spend $400,000. Well, what's going to happen? That means the person who has a house that their parents and their parents and their parents before them have basically left them, they see a guy like me coming like, wait, I can sell this house for $100,000 as is? $100,000 will go very, very far for someone who makes $400 a month. I don't have any problem with that. But enough of people like me move in, and now the neighborhood is much more expensive. Now the Starbucks move in, and all these various stores that start to cater to this higher level of income, and you have what we have here in the United States, gentrification, right? Same thing. Every big city in America complains about gentrification. Again, I'm not going to get into a long gentrification discussion, but the same exact issue is talked about in every forum I'm in for Mexico City, for Merida, for not so much in TJ, because TJ is in Tijuana, because the back and forth has happened quite a bit, but it is a complaint you hear from locals that they'll say basically people from the U.S. have moved in, or let's just say expats, because sometimes Canadians and Europeans too, and have driven the cost up, which means the locals have had to move out. It's very heated. There was one discussion not too long ago from Mexico City that was very heated. I remember reading the back and forth, and there was a news story of a family that had to move out of their bakery or something because they couldn't afford the rent anymore of the building, which was owned by other Mexicans, but they were like trying to kick all these things out and re-rent everything and upgrade it to rent to people like me. I get it. Am I part of the problem? I guess I am. I can't argue the point. I would say that maybe it's not quite as it's characterized, but I can't argue the point that he is trying to make. So we'll kind of leave it at that. You're welcome to comment, and we can comment back and forth in the discussion, but it's an interesting point. Do they charge to cross into Mexico? They do not. As of right now, this is, what is this? This is October of 2022. They do not charge. Now, from what I understand, they did charge during the pandemic. It was like $35 or something like that. I assume they were doing that to sort of make up for some of the lost tourist dollars. Because of the pandemic, they had a lot of things shut down. People weren't traveling, they weren't flying. So I bet their tourism had decreased quite a bit. So I'm sure that $35 was a way to help offset that. But since then, since the worst part of the pandemic, there's been no charge. I have never been charged. In fact, you're supposed to get the what is it called? The FNM. I can never remember. Basically a form that you fill out that says how long you're going to be down there. I've only ever had them fill that out one time at the Tijuana border. The other time, they just wave you through. They just look at you, okay, go. You throw your bag in the conveyor belt, it goes through the scanner, you grab it, and you walk right into Tijuana. Nobody seems to care. So certainly no one's stopping you. No one's giving you a $35 charge or whatever it was. They want you to come down there. They're more than happy to have you spend your money and leave it all in Mexico. They want you to go back, but they're happy to have you in, and they're not really putting up any roadblocks to get you down there. Same thing, flying into Merida, flying into into Mexico City. Neither time was there ever an expense. All right, so the next question is from Banana Peppers. That's the second person with the name Banana. Whatever. They asked this question. It's a little strange. Said they plan on going down there for 3 days. This is Tijuana. Could they park at the TJ airport, and they say on this side, and then Uber across like at 7 a.m.? So when you read that as it's written, it sounds like they're in Mexico already. They want to park their car at the TJ airport and then Uber into the U.S. So that's a little different. Usually I would think they'd be asking the opposite. Could they park on this side and then Uber into Mexico? But nonetheless, the answer is basically the same. I had to look it up because I really wasn't sure. I've taken Uber plenty of times all through Mexico, but you cannot cross the border. Now, I'm going to say you cannot. Maybe you can in some circumstances, but from what I was able to find out, no, you can't. And there's some practical reasons. One, let's just say in their case, it looks like they're going to be in Mexico and try to go into the U.S. That driver needs to have the ability to cross the border. They may not have that. So that's a knock right there. That car has to be not licensed, but has to be insured in both countries. That's an expense that they may not want to do. There was something else I was thinking of that I can't think off the top of my head. And then just the practical reality, as I just mentioned, the time involved in driving across, I can't see why it would be worth it. Even if you have a Century Pass, and there's another one, I can't think of the name of it, but the Century Pass is for people that travel back and forth very frequently. The people that work in one country and live in the other, they usually have a Century Pass, which allows them to bypass most of the line, but they can still wait an hour. You never know. Traffic is just traffic. Why would you do that when I can walk across the border and then pick up the Uber there? So the way you would generally want to do that is take your Uber up to the border, whatever border this may be, walk over, then pick up an Uber right outside the border gate there, and go about your business on the Uber on the other side of the border. It's a very simple process. I've done it many times. I would not expect that your driver could drive you across. It's just, here's another thing. I mentioned the Century Pass. You can have a Century Pass that allows you to go back and forth very quickly. Again, it's like having a fast pass at Disney. You get to jump the line. You're still going to be in a line. It just is probably way shorter. However, when you get to the border, they're going to have to look at the people in the car. Everyone in the car has to have that Century Pass. So your driver may have it, but if you don't, he can't use that line. He has to then sit in the regular line. Now you're back to a 3, 4, 5, 6 hour wait. So again, it's a good question. It just doesn't really work in a practical sense. Let's see, what else do I got? Let me just one more question. Gringo Loco, again, I think we had a Gringo Loco question earlier. Why are you going to TJ, or why are you going to Costco in TJ? Well, that's a good question. I was in Minnesota this past week on business, and I was talking to some people, and I mentioned going to Costco, and they all had the same question, like, "What? There's Costco in Tijuana?" I'm like, "Yeah, there's Costco all over Mexico. It's huge in Mexico." I've been to a Costco in Tijuana. I've been by the one in Mexico City. I was in and out of the one in Merida, and I don't go to Costco here in the United States. Go figure, right? But there's Costco's everywhere. There are Walmarts everywhere. There are Home Depots everywhere. There's McDonald's, KFC. It's all there. I think, unfortunately, for a lot of Americans, people from the United States, I gotta stop saying Americans because it is North America, and they are as well. It's not what people picture. It's a city. It's a country, just like we have. And if I'm Costco, and I have the ability to make money by selling stuff in Mexico, why wouldn't I open a Costco, right? It makes perfect sense. We just don't think of it. But legitimately, they're everywhere, and they work fine, and they're full of locals buying food from Costco and shirts and whatever else you buy from Costco. And they sell the hot dogs in the Costco just like they do here in the United States. The reason I went to Costco specifically was for medicine. This gets into a much longer discussion that we're not going to go into today, but I probably should do a video on it. But I want to give you an example. I take a specific type of medicine that we're not going to get into my medical history. It doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal, but just leave it off the table just for example's sake. That medicine at a Costco here, again, I don't shop at Costco, but I had to look it up for comparison's sake, is $995 for this medicine that I would do once a month. That would last me a month. That same exact medicine in the same exact box, and this is like a syringe with preloaded medicine in it. That same exact medicine by the same lab, the same box, other than it's written in Spanish, same dosage, $175. So again, $995 in San Diego, 20 miles away across a border, it's $175. I'm not a math whiz, but that's a lot less. So there became a point like, well, I mean, this is what my insurance wasn't covering. I have a different insurance now that will cover it. But at the time, my particular insurance I was having didn't cover that medication, even though my doctor was like, this is what you really need. I was like, well, I'm just going to go down to TJ. It's $175. Why would I spend $1,000 when I can spend $175? When you go back and forth, a lot of people go down there to buy medicine. Now, there are ins and outs. That's why I haven't done a video on it yet. I don't know 100% all the laws, and I don't want to lead people astray. But I've come back across the border every single time. I declare that medicine every single time. The Border Patrol has never given me any kind of issue whatsoever. They've asked me what it is, and I've told them it's for my diabetes. I'm type 2 diabetic and have been most of my adult life. And they'll say, oh, okay. They'll ask me, anything else? Like, no, nothing. I didn't even buy aspirin. I just what I'm buying, that one thing. They said, no problem, and wave me on. Very simple. I think the last time I was there, he asked me, but you didn't get any sort of painkillers? I said, no, because I'm sure they're looking like for Oxy and stuff like that, stuff that I could possibly sell. No one's selling diabetic medicine on the black market. I mean, I guess they could be, but they're not. That's all they're really concerned about. From what I have heard, and I'm going to say this again with a big air quotes, this is what I've heard. Don't quote me. As long as you're within that range of clearly and obviously personal use, they don't really care so much. I'm not moving diabetic medicine. I'm not muling it back and forth, to be on the corner like, psst, hey, you want some diabetic medicine? I'm not doing that. So they're not looking at me. They're not concerned about that. They're concerned about the guy who's bringing Oxy or bringing something else that has some sort of codeine or something, something like that we clearly don't sell here over the counter that they do down there or is more readily available. They know it. And maybe it's because I live in California and it's such a common practice. So many people here do go and travel for that they're not sweating the fact that someone's going down there and grabbing medicine. And I go once every 6-8 weeks. I get enough to cover, and then I that's it. It's a simple process. So I thought it was a good question. I could see they were surprised. Like, why would you go to Costco? Why would you go to Mexico just to go to Costco? I've never been to the one here in San Diego. In fact, I'm not 100% sure if my membership covers me in both. Because I've never been to the one here. I need to go in and just try it. I'll do a video on that and see. what happened. See if they let me use it. That'd be interesting. I can't remember what I spent down there. 500 pesos sticks in my head, so it's not very much. I don't know what the Costco membership is in the United States, but it would be interesting if they let me use it at both. That'd be worth the drive and the walking across just to get a cheaper membership, right? Hey, so I hope you liked that video. I hope I answered some questions that you may have had. So it's random. They weren't in a particular order, just questions that other people had. And I thought, maybe you might get some benefit out of that. But in the meantime, why not check out some of the other videos over here? These are some of the videos that I've covered Mexico in, and look in the description or just go to that playlist on my page. There's a lot of great information in those videos, and I bet you find a lot more answers, or actually it might create some more questions. If that's the case, make sure you ask that in the comments on whatever video you're watching, and I do my darndest to make sure I answer everybody with either I know the answer or I don't know the answer, and maybe another viewer will know it and they'll answer you as well. But ask me what you can, and I'll do as much as I can to help you with those answers. So in the meantime, keep on trekking.